The person standing quietly beside you may be carrying a story powerful enough to change everything you believe about them. In the peaceful city of Brookhaven, most people believed they understood the world around them. They recognized their neighbors, remembered familiar faces, and formed opinions based on the small details they noticed every day. A person's clothing, their appearance, and the way they carried themselves often became the first chapter of a story others created in their minds. But sometimes, the most important parts of a person's life remain completely invisible. Marcus Reynolds was one of those people. To the residents of Brookhaven, Marcus appeared to be an ordinary man living a quiet and private life. He enjoyed simple routines, peaceful mornings, and conversations that had nothing to do with his professional responsibilities. He never walked through the neighborhood looking for attention. He never introduced himself by his position. He never expected people to treat him differently because of the work he had done. To those around him, Marcus was simply Marcus. What nobody knew was that behind his calm personality was a career built on dedication, discipline, and service. For years, Marcus had worked as an FBI agent, carrying responsibilities that required patience, careful judgment, and an understanding of people from every possible background. His profession demanded more than knowledge of the law. It required emotional control, attention to detail, and the ability to remain steady when situations were uncertain. Yet outside of his work, Marcus chose simplicity. He believed that a person's value should never depend on a title written on a card or a position recognized by others. He believed respect was most meaningful when it was given before anyone knew what someone had achieved. That belief shaped every part of his life. Marcus had seen many situations where people changed their behavior after discovering someone's identity. A person who was ignored suddenly received attention. Someone who was underestimated suddenly received approval. But Marcus understood something deeper. True respect should not appear only after a person's importance becomes obvious. It should exist from the beginning. Miles away from Marcus's quiet neighborhood, Officer Daniel Whitmore began another day with the Brookhaven Police Department. Daniel had built his career around responsibility and awareness. He believed being a good officer meant paying attention, following procedures, and making thoughtful decisions. His uniform represented a visible form of authority, one that people recognized immediately. Daniel knew that every interaction mattered because trust between officers and communities was built one moment at a time. He relied on his training and experience to guide him through unfamiliar situations. He believed preparation and observation were essential parts of his role. What Daniel did not know was that the person living quietly in Brookhaven carried a level of experience and responsibility that few people could imagine. One man carried a badge that everyone could see. The other carried a responsibility that remained hidden. Neither Marcus nor Daniel knew their paths would soon cross. Neither understood that a single encounter would challenge assumptions, reveal hidden truths, and remind everyone that appearances only show a small piece of a much larger story. Daniel Whitmore had spent years learning one important lesson about his profession. Every decision carried a responsibility. A police officer's role was not simply about reacting to situations. It was about understanding circumstances, gathering information, and making choices that could affect people's lives. That belief shaped the way Daniel approached each day in Brookhaven. He arrived for his shifts with the same mindset he had developed throughout his career. Stay alert, remain professional, and never forget the trust placed in him by the community. To many people, Daniel represented the visible side of law enforcement. His uniform immediately showed his role. His badge communicated authority before he ever spoke a word. People understood his position the moment they saw him. But Daniel also knew that a badge alone was not enough. The way an officer used judgment, patience, and fairness mattered just as much as the authority that came with the uniform. Over the years, Daniel had handled countless situations where he had to make decisions with limited information. He learned to observe small details, listen carefully, and rely on his training. Experience gave him confidence, but it also created habits. Like many professionals, he sometimes trusted what he had learned from previous situations to guide him through new ones. Across town, Marcus Reynolds continued living the quiet life he had chosen outside of his career. Although his work with the Federal Bureau of Investigation required him to understand complex situations, his personal life was intentionally simple. He did not want every interaction to begin with people knowing his title. He wanted conversations to happen naturally. He wanted people to see Marcus before they saw the FBI agent. During his years of service, Marcus had learned that people often reacted differently once they discovered someone's background. A person who seemed ordinary could suddenly become important in the eyes of others. But Marcus believed that was the wrong order of thinking. A person's value should come before their accomplishments are revealed. Respect should come before recognition. That belief separated Marcus from many people who carried positions of authority. He understood the power of a title, but he also understood the responsibility that came with it. He never wanted his professional identity to become a reason for receiving treatment that others did not receive. As another day unfolded in Brookhaven, the lives of Marcus and Daniel continued moving closer without either man realizing it. Daniel prepared for another routine shift, unaware that someone connected to the federal system was living nearby. Marcus continued his day, unaware that his decision to remain private would soon create an unexpected situation. Two people, two different forms of authority, one visible and one hidden. Both believed they understood the world around them. Both believed they were prepared for whatever came next. But sometimes the moments that reveal the most about people are the ones nobody plans for. Sometimes a simple encounter can expose the difference between what people see and what is truly there. And when that moment arrived, both Marcus and Daniel would discover that a person's story is always much bigger than the first impression they leave behind. Before Marcus Reynolds ever became known as an FBI agent, he learned that the most valuable part of service was not the recognition that came with a title. It was the responsibility that came with the work. Throughout his career, Marcus discovered that trust was built through actions, not introductions. People could learn his position in seconds, but understanding his character required something much deeper. That lesson stayed with him every day, including the moments when he stepped away from his professional life and simply became another person in the community. Marcus had spent years working in environments where information mattered. A small detail could change the understanding of an entire situation. A person who seemed unfamiliar could have a history that nobody expected. A quiet conversation could reveal important truths that were hidden beneath the surface. This experience shaped the way Marcus viewed people. He knew that first impressions were often incomplete, and he believed that patience was one of the most important qualities anyone could have. During his time with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, Marcus worked with many different personalities and backgrounds. He learned that some people used their positions to demand attention, while others allowed their actions to speak for them. Marcus chose the second path. He never wanted his title to become the reason someone respected him. He wanted respect to come from the way he treated people. Outside of work, Marcus kept his life private. His neighbors knew him as someone polite, thoughtful, and calm. They saw the person he was every day, but they did not know the professional responsibilities he carried. Marcus preferred it that way. He enjoyed being part of the community without creating distance between himself and others. He believed that people connected better when they met each other as individuals rather than as titles or positions. However, keeping his identity private also meant accepting that others would judge him based only on what they could see. Marcus understood that reality. He knew that appearances often influenced decisions, even when people did not realize it. Throughout his life, he had seen how quickly opinions could form when information was limited. But instead of allowing those moments to create anger, Marcus used them as reminders of why fairness mattered. Meanwhile, Officer Daniel Whitmore continued his work in Brookhaven with the same dedication he had always shown. He believed in preparation, responsibility, and serving the community with professionalism. His experience taught him to pay attention to details and trust the training he had received. Daniel was not aware of Marcus's background. He did not know about the years of federal service, the investigations, or the responsibilities carried quietly by the man living nearby. To Daniel, Marcus was simply another person in the community. That was the reality both men lived in. One carried a hidden history of service. The other carried a visible symbol of authority. Neither knew that their paths were about to cross in a way that would challenge assumptions and reveal a lesson neither of them expected. Because sometimes the moments that change people's understanding begin with something completely ordinary. The day began quietly in Brookhaven, with the same familiar rhythm that filled the community every morning. People followed their routines, businesses opened their doors, and neighbors moved through their schedules without expecting anything unusual to happen. For Marcus Reynolds, it was simply another day of living the life he had chosen outside of his professional responsibilities. He valued the ability to walk through his community without being defined by his career. He valued being known as a person first. But sometimes, life creates moments that reveal what people cannot see at first glance. Marcus continued his day with the same calm mindset that had guided him for years. He understood the importance of patience, especially in situations where emotions could easily influence decisions. His experience with the Federal Bureau of Investigation taught him that the most important information was not always the information people noticed immediately. Sometimes the truth remained hidden until the right moment brought it forward. Across Brookhaven, Officer Daniel Whitmore was also beginning his day. Like many mornings, he prepared himself for the responsibilities ahead. Daniel believed that every interaction mattered because each one represented the relationship between law enforcement and the community. He took pride in being dependable and professional. His years of experience had taught him to pay attention, ask questions, and make decisions based on the information available. Neither Marcus nor Daniel knew that their paths were moving closer together. Neither expected that an ordinary moment would soon become something they would remember. When they finally encountered each other, it did not begin with dramatic signs or obvious warnings. It started as a normal interaction between two individuals who believed they understood the situation in front of them. Daniel saw a person whose background he did not know. Marcus saw an officer doing what he believed was his responsibility. Both approached the moment from their own perspective. Daniel relied on his training and experience. Marcus relied on patience and self-control. The difference was not that one person cared more about fairness than the other. The difference was that one person had information the other did not. Marcus knew the years of service behind his own story. Daniel only saw the details available in that moment. This was the challenge of every first impression. People often make decisions based on limited pieces of information, unaware of everything that remains unseen. Marcus had experienced this before, and he understood that revealing his identity immediately would change the entire nature of the interaction. Suddenly, the focus would move from the situation itself to the title he carried. People might respond differently because they knew his position rather than because they understood the person standing before them. So Marcus remained calm and allowed the moment to continue naturally. He wanted the truth to appear when it was supposed to, not because he wanted to create surprise, but because he believed lessons were strongest when they came from genuine understanding. As the encounter continued, neither man realized how much was hidden beneath the surface. One saw an ordinary citizen. The other carried a responsibility that reached far beyond the community around them. And soon, the difference between appearance and reality would become impossible to ignore. The atmosphere around Marcus Reynolds and Officer Daniel Whitmore changed slowly, almost quietly, because neither man realized at first how important the moment had become. What appeared to be a simple interaction was actually revealing something much deeper about assumptions, responsibility, and the way people see one another. Daniel continued to approach the situation through the perspective of his training. He focused on the information available to him, the circumstances he could observe, and the responsibility he carried as an officer of the Brookhaven Police Department. His intentions were connected to maintaining order and following the expectations of his role. He did not know the complete story behind the person standing in front of him. He only knew what he could see at that moment. Marcus understood that reality better than most people. Throughout his years of service with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, he had learned that situations were rarely as simple as they first appeared. A person could never be fully understood through a single moment, a single conversation, or a single assumption. Behind every individual was a collection of experiences, challenges, and decisions that shaped who they became. That understanding was one of the reasons Marcus remained calm. He knew that reacting emotionally would only change the direction of the situation. Instead, he chose patience. He chose to let the process unfold. He believed that truth did not need to be forced when it could reveal itself naturally. As the interaction continued, small details began creating questions. The way Marcus communicated, the confidence behind his words, and the calmness he maintained did not match the assumptions someone might make from a quick observation. There was a level of composure that suggested experience, but the reason behind it remained unknown. Daniel noticed these details, but he did not yet understand their meaning. Sometimes the most important information is hidden in plain sight. A person can carry years of knowledge, leadership, and service without showing any outward sign of it. That was exactly the situation with Marcus. He was not trying to hide because he was afraid of who he was. He was simply living according to a principle he had followed for years. People should be valued for their character before their achievements are revealed. Meanwhile, Marcus knew there would eventually come a moment when his identity would need to be confirmed. He did not want that moment to become a display of authority. He did not want people to suddenly change their behavior because of a title. He wanted the lesson to be understood beyond his position. The encounter was not only about one person being right and another person being wrong. It was about how quickly people can form opinions when they only have part of the information. For Daniel, it was an ordinary situation that required attention and professionalism. For Marcus, it was another reminder of why fairness mattered even in small moments. Neither man knew that the next step would bring information that would completely change the way everyone viewed the encounter. The truth about Marcus Reynolds had remained quiet for years. But soon, that hidden truth would become impossible to overlook. The moment when the hidden truth began to surface arrived without the dramatic signs anyone expected. There was no announcement, no preparation, and no warning that the ordinary situation in Brookhaven was about to reveal something much larger. It started with a simple process that happened every day in many professional environments: verification. When questions remained unanswered, the next step was not assumption. It was finding the facts. Marcus Reynolds remained composed as the situation continued. He understood that his identity carried significance, but he also understood that revealing it would change the entire atmosphere. Suddenly, people would no longer see only the person standing before them. They would see the position, the responsibility, and the reputation connected to his name. Marcus had spent years learning that authority was most meaningful when it was used carefully. He did not want recognition to replace understanding. He wanted the truth to speak for itself. Officer Daniel Whitmore noticed that something about the situation felt different from what he initially expected. Marcus's calm communication and patience stood out. Daniel had dealt with many different interactions throughout his career, and he knew that every person had a story beyond what appeared on the surface. Still, he had not yet discovered the full story behind Marcus. That information was about to change everything. A request for confirmation moved through the proper channels, and the details that returned created a completely different perspective. The person Daniel had viewed as an ordinary individual was connected to a level of federal responsibility far beyond what anyone nearby had realized. Marcus Reynolds was not simply someone passing through Brookhaven. He was an FBI agent whose career had been built on service, investigation, and protecting the public interest. The realization changed the way people looked at the situation, but Marcus remained the same person he had been from the beginning. He did not demand attention. He did not use his position as a weapon. He simply allowed the facts to provide the missing context. The reaction around him was a reminder of something Marcus had witnessed many times throughout his career. People often change their behavior when they discover someone's title. They become more careful. They become more respectful. They suddenly recognize qualities they may have overlooked before. But Marcus believed that the most important question was not whether people respected him after learning who he was. The important question was whether people would offer that same respect if they never knew. Officer Daniel found himself thinking about that question as well. The situation challenged him to consider the difference between seeing a person and truly understanding them. His training had taught him the importance of observation, but this moment revealed that observation was only the beginning. True judgment required patience, awareness, and the willingness to look beyond the first impression. Around them, the atmosphere in Brookhaven began to shift. What had started as an ordinary encounter became a lesson about identity, assumptions, and fairness. Marcus had never needed anyone to know his title in order to understand his worth. But now that the truth was known, everyone involved had a chance to understand something greater. A person's value does not begin when others discover their achievements. It exists long before that moment. The truth about Marcus Reynolds changed the atmosphere in Brookhaven, but it did not change the way Marcus carried himself. For him, the most important part of the moment was not that people discovered his position. It was what they learned after discovering it. A title could reveal someone's role, but it could never fully reveal someone's character. Marcus had spent years understanding that difference. Throughout his career with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, he had seen situations where people reacted differently once they learned important details about someone. A person who was ignored could suddenly receive attention. A person who was questioned could suddenly receive approval. But Marcus believed that fairness should not depend on a person's identity being revealed. It should exist from the very beginning. Officer Daniel Whitmore continued reflecting on everything that had happened. The information about Marcus changed the way he viewed the encounter, but it also created a deeper question that stayed in his mind. If Marcus had never revealed his background, would the same level of respect have appeared? That question was difficult because it went beyond one interaction. It challenged the way people sometimes make decisions about others before knowing the full story. Daniel had always considered himself a professional. He believed in responsibility, preparation, and serving the community. Those values had guided him for years. But this moment reminded him that professionalism was not only about following procedures. It was also about recognizing the humanity of every person involved. Chief Robert Lawson of the Brookhaven Police Department became aware of the situation and understood that moments like this were important opportunities for reflection. He knew that trust between law enforcement and the community was built through actions, not statements. A strong organization was not one that never faced difficult questions. A strong organization was one willing to examine those questions honestly and learn from them. The focus was not about creating unnecessary conflict. It was about understanding how assumptions could influence decisions and how awareness could create better outcomes in the future. Marcus appreciated that approach because he had never wanted the situation to become about embarrassment or personal victory. He did not believe justice was about making another person feel defeated. He believed justice was about creating understanding and ensuring that people were treated with fairness. His response surprised some people because they expected anger. Instead, they saw patience. They saw someone who understood the importance of using influence responsibly. Marcus knew that moments like this could become lessons if people were willing to listen. Daniel also recognized that growth often begins with uncomfortable reflection. The experience did not erase his commitment to serving the community. Instead, it encouraged him to think more carefully about the assumptions that could exist beneath everyday decisions. The encounter between Marcus and Daniel became something larger than either person expected. It became a reminder that people are often carrying stories, experiences, and responsibilities that others cannot immediately see. A uniform can show a role. A title can show a position. But neither one can measure the true character of a person. And sometimes, the greatest lessons come from discovering that the person we thought we understood was someone we had never truly seen at all. The days following the encounter in Brookhaven carried a different feeling for everyone involved. What had started as a moment of uncertainty became a reminder that understanding often begins when people are willing to look beyond what is immediately visible. For Marcus Reynolds, the experience reinforced a belief he had carried throughout his life. A person should never have to reveal their achievements before receiving basic respect. Respect should not arrive after a title is discovered. It should exist before anyone knows the story behind a person. Marcus continued his responsibilities with the same quiet determination that had always defined him. His work with the Federal Bureau of Investigation required focus, discipline, and the ability to understand complicated situations. But outside of his professional role, Marcus remained the same person his neighbors had always known. He still valued simple conversations, ordinary moments, and connections built through genuine interactions. The attention surrounding the situation did not make him change because his identity was never based only on his position. It was based on the principles he followed every day. Officer Daniel Whitmore also carried the experience with him. He thought about the moment from different angles and considered what it revealed about perception. Daniel understood that experience was valuable, but he also recognized that experience had to be balanced with awareness. Knowing how to respond was important, but knowing when to pause and understand more was equally important. His role required authority, but it also required humility. Daniel did not see the encounter as something that defined him forever. Instead, he saw it as an opportunity to become a better officer and a better person. He understood that growth came from being willing to examine difficult moments honestly. Chief Robert Lawson continued guiding the Brookhaven Police Department with the belief that trust was built through consistent actions. He knew communities did not expect perfection from every individual. They expected honesty, accountability, and a commitment to improvement. The situation involving Marcus became a reminder that every interaction represented the values an organization wanted to uphold. It was not about one person's mistake or another person's status. It was about creating a culture where fairness was practiced before assumptions were made. Marcus never wanted people to remember him only because he was an FBI agent. He wanted people to remember the lesson behind the moment. He wanted them to understand that every individual carries a story that deserves consideration. A person walking through a neighborhood, entering a building, or having a simple conversation may carry experiences, responsibilities, and challenges that no one else can see. That truth became the lasting message from Brookhaven. The difference between judgment and understanding often comes down to one simple choice: whether someone is willing to look deeper. The visible signs of authority may attract attention, but the invisible qualities of character are what truly define a person. Marcus had a federal title, but his greatest strength was not the position he held. It was the way he chose to use it. Daniel wore a badge, but his greatest responsibility was not the authority it represented. It was the trust connected to it. And through their unexpected encounter, both men discovered a lesson that extended far beyond that single day. People are more than the first impression they create. They are more than what others assume. They are the complete stories that remain unseen until someone takes the time to understand. The story of Marcus Reynolds and Officer Daniel Whitmore remained in the minds of many people in Brookhaven, not because of a dramatic confrontation, but because of the quiet lesson that followed. What happened between them became a reminder that every person carries a story that cannot always be recognized at first glance. Some stories are written through years of dedication. Some are built through challenges, choices, and moments that shape who someone becomes. Marcus understood that better than most. After everything that happened, he continued forward with the same humility that had guided him for years. His role with the Federal Bureau of Investigation was important, but it was never the only thing that defined him. He was still the same person who valued kindness, patience, and respect in everyday interactions. The experience did not make him seek attention or demand recognition. Instead, it strengthened his belief that fairness should begin before anyone knows a person's achievements. Marcus knew that true character was revealed through actions, especially during moments when nobody expected anything in return. Officer Daniel Whitmore also carried the memory of that day with a renewed understanding of his own responsibilities. His experience as an officer had taught him the importance of awareness, but the encounter reminded him that awareness required more than observation. It required empathy. It required the willingness to recognize that every person standing in front of him had a complete story beyond what was immediately visible. Daniel continued serving Brookhaven with a deeper appreciation for the trust placed in his position. He understood that authority was not only about having the ability to make decisions. It was about making those decisions with fairness and respect. Chief Robert Lawson saw the situation as a meaningful opportunity for the department and the community. He believed that strong organizations were built by people who were willing to learn from every experience. The goal was not to focus only on what happened in one moment. The goal was to understand what that moment could teach everyone moving forward. The events in Brookhaven became a conversation about perception, responsibility, and the importance of treating people with dignity before knowing their background. Marcus never wanted the lesson to be that an FBI agent deserved more respect than anyone else. That was never the point. The lesson was that every person deserves respect regardless of their position, profession, or recognition. A person should not need a title to prove their worth. A person should not need a reputation to receive fairness. Years of service may reveal what someone has accomplished, but they do not create the value that already existed. The encounter between Marcus and Daniel showed that the greatest misunderstandings often come from seeing only a small part of someone's story. It reminded people that appearances are incomplete, assumptions can be limited, and patience can reveal what quick judgments miss. In the end, Marcus remained a federal agent, Daniel remained a police officer, and Brookhaven continued as a community learning from its experiences. But the most important thing that remained was the message they carried forward. A badge can represent duty. A title can represent achievement. But the way a person treats others reveals the true measure of who they are. And sometimes, the person we think we understand the least can become the person who teaches us the most.